Hi, I'm Lynn. Thanks for joining me today. You may have caught one of my previous videos where I showed how to make these cute little swatch books. But if you haven't, in this video, I'll be actually showing a different binding technique, but I'll just briefly go over how I created these. I have this die set from Tonic Studios. It's called the Legacy Keeper Creator die set. And even though it's a large die set, you can't hardly even see the whole thing in the frame, but it does require a large platform die cutting machine, which I don't have, but I bought the die set anyways because there are 32 individual dies in this set, and only one of them requires the large platform die cutting machine. So there are still 31 dies that can easily pass through a standard die cutting machine, and actually I think most of these, if not all of the ones except for the largest, will even pass through smaller little mini machines like the Sidekick. So very cute, very fun. I haven't been able to make the main sort of I guess folio wallet that the dies are designed to allow you to create, but I've found plenty of other uses for it, and one of them is to create these little swatch books. So I'll just quickly flip through a couple of them. I have two binding styles, and I did a walkthrough just flipping through one of them, and a tutorial style showing how to do this first binding, where essentially you have page signatures that you can flip through, and the binding is really simple. You just loop some twine, or in this case I use embroidery floss, and you just loop it in between the page and the spine. So I'll just quickly flip through these swatch books. These are so cute. The swatch books that I've made of designer paper are, for me, they're more like keepsakes, but because I buy paper generally with a project in mind, I do try to buy more than what I think I'll need, and so I have some left over. So these swatch books will come in handy later as well, more for actual project planning. But once I'm out of the paper, it is kind of nice to have like a little keepsake of that pattern paper. And if I happen to be midway through a project and I'm out, I'll know, which page, which design I need to order more of if it's a particular pattern paper that is sold by the individual sheet as well. So that's one binding method. The second binding method, which I'll show you how to create today, is what I use for my colored cardstock. And I have several, as you can see, all sorts of colors in the rainbow, and then my neutrals. And what I've done here is, what's different in these versus the other ones are the first style of binding actually relies on a page base that I then adhere the pattern paper onto. So it doesn't really give you a good sense of the thickness of the paper. In this swatch book, I wanted to preserve being able to evaluate the thickness of the cardstock so that when I'm choosing my pattern paper for matted layers, or potentially as to use as a card base, I can feel how thick the paper is and make a good decision based on that. Now on the back of each, I've written the brand and the paper weight, but I don't know about you, maybe it's just me, but even taking 2 sheets of 65-pound paper, sometimes they don't feel like they are the same thickness. So that's why the number alone, even when it's in GSM, it feels like the number alone isn't telling enough. So I like to really feel for myself. And these 110-pound Recollections cardstock paper, they're really thick. They could be card bases easily. So so in order to preserve that, I couldn't use the same binding technique as in my designer paper Swatchbooks because those are mounted onto a page base. So what I've done instead here is similar to, and you can see how I do all the die cutting and stuff in my other tutorial video, but essentially I used the 2 smaller frames in the die set to cut out full pages this time. In my in the first style of binding I showed, I only cut to where you see the score line, but in this case I'm cutting full pages. And so then what I do is I'll start to assemble this so that you can see the process. But now that you know where we're headed, hopefully that helps you sort of understand where we're going. So I scored in this case at 3/8 of an inch from one of the ends. It doesn't really matter which. Then I'll give it a fold and a score, or score, fold, and a burnish. So the booklet I'm working on, the swatchbook I'm working on today is all of these really pretty specialty papers. These are foiled papers, some shimmer papers, and then some glitter papers. So Michael's had a, I think, 20% off coupon for like all regular priced items, and so I wanted to try out the Recollections color solid color cardstock, and browsing around I found some other stuff that I just had to have. While I'm talking, I'll just also work. So what I'm going to do is that tab we just folded over, I'm going to glue it down. So one of the nifty things that they have is these scrap packs, and they have it in their regular cardstock as well as in a foil pack and a glitter pack. And it's scraps, so maybe it's from leftover from if they teach classes, I suppose, and they have leftover papers. I'm guessing that each time you order it, you're not going to be guaranteed to get the exact same selection, but what does come is a pretty nice variety of papers that I'm going to hold this down because it is textured. This one is this is really pretty. So it actually surprised me. It was in the regular scrap pack. It's kind of got a linen texture to it, but then it's also a little shimmery. So it's got a little bit of both finishes going on. And this foil paper, it's really pretty. I was surprised to see the sort of craft paper backing, but it takes a fold really nice. It doesn't seem to crack, and same with the glitter. It doesn't seem to crack or tear or anything. So I'll just show you. This is what one of those scrap packs looks like. This is what the glitter one looks like. So you don't get a huge 8.5 by 11, 12 by 12 or anything like that. This is more, sorry for the crinkly noise. Isn't that gorgeous? So I think it's probably 4x6. Yep, so this is 6. Yep, and that's 4. And this is 3x3. So you get a bunch of 4x6 and a bunch of 3x3 pieces. And it looks like they sell it by the total pound. So it's a pound of paper is what you're getting. And this foil one happens to be 65-pound weight paper. And what's really nice is because I didn't mind that these came in these small little pieces, because normally when I'm using glitter or foil, it's really like in small doses. So I think this will work out just fine. And a 4x6 is probably still going to be large enough to even be a matted layer on a card, like a nice little glitter border or foil border. And I do a lot of die cut inlaying, and so having some of these specialty papers is really nice. I prefer in this case to have the variety. This one's really, I don't even know what this is called, this finish. If you know, let me know in the comments what finish this is. But it's really a great way to get a lot of variety. And sure, you can't pick and you're not guaranteed to get the same variety later, but at least you have a nice sampling. And if you fall in love with something, then you know, hopefully they sell it by individual packs, and so you can just pick up that color individually later if you absolutely loved it or needed it for a particular project and you were out. So in this case, I really preferred having the variety as opposed to buying larger sheets and having to pick and choose the colors individually. Okay, so now that we've dried this, the next step is to punch 2 little holes down at the bottom, and that's where we're going to thread our I'm going to be using twine today to bind my book. So basically, when you make the determination of where to punch your holes, you want to punch such that the holes are entirely on the double layer that you folded over. And that was the reason to fold it over like this, to give a little bit of extra reinforcement so that you have 2 layers of cardstock where the thread will be going through, and that gives it a little bit of extra sturdiness. So you want to punch on sort of center on that little strip there, and then you can sort of space them out however you want, getting it sort of equal or level with each other so that your pages fit in sort of square to the spine. So determining the first one is probably the hardest, but from there you have a template, and then you can just line up your new page with the page that already has holes in it. And I use this, it's from my leather crafting, so if you, whatever hole punch tool that you have, feel free to use. But see, I can punch right through and get a new set of holes on my new page. And what I do is, after I punch a page, I use the newly punched page as the template from the next page that I'm punching. And then that way you aren't continuing to kind of stress that hole and stretch or widen it. So I'll do that again. I'm just going to line up a page that already has holes with the page that I just glued down. Make sure it's nice and lined up, and fit my hole punch over the existing hole and just punch. Okay, so now we have our pages They all have 2 holes in them. And I already went through and labeled everything. So the backs all have labels. This is going to be a pretty thick book. I hope it all fits. Okay, so now we just have our cover to make. I've already cut out the pieces to build our cover, and today I'm going to be using, I did some experiment and just had some fun with alcohol inks, and these were just scraps. That's the beautiful part about this project, is that you can really just use up your scraps, and because these swatchbooks are so small, I think they're like 2 by 4 or so, and they're really don't take up a lot of paper. So even if you're swatching some pretty expensive designer paper or specialty paper, you're not really taking a huge chunk out of it, and you know, so it's not a huge waste in that way. And actually, you can see here, I swatched from the 3 by 3 inch, and I just mounted that on to like a page base that I cut in half. So you can see this is a page base that I just adhered the actual paper I was swatching. So that way I had a full page, but at the ends here I could still evaluate the thickness of that paper. And this glitter paper is pretty nice. It doesn't seem to shed, and if it does, it's pretty minimal. Maybe a little bit of shedding, but not a ton really. And it takes a fold really well. It die cuts really well. I've already started using it on a project. Anyhow, I digress. So my cover is going to be from this alcohol inked piece that I have. So I've got front cover outside, front cover inside, back cover outside, back cover inside. And then I have the trying to show you an example, the top portion, and you can put these together in a variety of ways. So I've in this one I put the hinge, the spine wrapped around the outside just to have that decorative border, and I don't know if I'll do that this time, but it's definitely an option. Or if you don't like it, you can always put your hinge on the inside and then sandwich the hinge in between your 2 cover pieces, which I might do, just to have something a little different. So then this top piece is really just going to be, in this case, I do want to show off more of the alcohol ink panel. So instead of attaching the top flap to the outside, I'm actually going to sandwich it in between my back cover outer layer and inner layer. So it'll look like this at the top. And I already glued this little hinge onto this top panel. This top panel here is actually one of the dies in the set. So that came from the set. All the pages came from the die set, and the cover, which is slightly larger than our pages, that comes from the die set as well. So this little die set, I'm only using 3 dies from it, but I'm able to create this really cute little book. The only thing I had to hand cut was my top flap. So all I did there was I just cut out a little, in this case it's a square, because this width I think ends up being 1.5 inches, and I wanted a 1/2 inch gusset, and that's my spine width as well, so that's going to match my spine. And I gave myself 1/2 inch on either ends to attach to the back and the front flap. I'm actually, just like all of my other books, I'm using a magnetic closure. So this top flap here will have an outer piece and an inner piece. And the inner piece is going to hide our magnet and hide the inner workings of our hinge here. Okay, so let's start putting things together. I'm gonna start, oh, I didn't walk through, sorry, the spine piece. The spine piece, I actually cut 2 of the exact same shape as that top flap. And I gave myself half an inch in the, about half an inch, maybe a little bit more, as a gusset, and just scored down, and then did the exact same thing on a second piece. The only difference is that I actually scored it so that the gusset is just a hair smaller than the outer piece, and that's so that these can fit in and the creases, your score lines, are not sitting right on top of each other. That will allow your pages, your covers to fold nicely without kind of cramping up on each other. So not very scientific, I know, but if you just score it and fold it such that you can just smoothly sort of slide the inner spine piece in the outer spine piece, then you're good to go. Okay, so I am going to start attaching this, and I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to hide the spine inside my cover, because this alcohol inked panel is pretty, and I don't want to cover it all up. So here's what I'll start with. I'm gonna put some, I'm using PVA glue. It's Lineco's pH neutral, and I will just put generous amount here. And when I put my cover piece on, I don't want to be over that score line, so I'm gonna actually fold it just so that I know where it is and move this. That's the nice part about using a liquid glue. You've got plenty of time to kind of move it around, and you just don't want to cross over the score line. You want to butt up right against it, make sure everything is straight, and then I'm gonna give it a good burnish. Get that glue spread out evenly, make sure it's getting nice, good contact. And keep in mind, if you do use something like an alcohol inked panel, this is Yupo paper, so it's not fibrous. I think it's more like a plastic, so it's I believe it's non-porous. So you want to choose a glue that's going to be appropriate for a non-porous surface. So I'm just remembering that fact now, so I might switch over to my 3-in-1 Beacon 3-in-1. Okay, so now I'm going to put my inner cover piece, and what I'm making sure of is that I guess I might have already done this, because you want to make sure that you line up the top of your 2 cover pieces, but you want to make sure that at the bottom you're not going to cover your crease or your hinge at the bottom in any way. So that will allow this to fold nice and freely. I am going to trim just a smidge off of it because it was starting to catch on the as I was folding that in right at the end there. I know it's not a lot, but if your paper crosses into that hinge, it can really obstruct sort of the functionality of opening and closing and bending this hinge back and forward. So okay, now it's bending more freely. So I'll talk through and then I'll do it. So this is my front, this is my spine. I'm gonna sandwich my spine in between, and then I still have my inner spine. And the reason why I'm putting 2 spine pieces in is because you know, the spine is a very central part of the book. It's the binding is going to go, it's in this case it was more important in this style of binding because I was wrapping the twine around it, but I'm still going to do it here because it's still going to give extra thickness and strength to our cover overall, because all of the other pieces in the cover are 2 layers of cardstock, and it's still responsible for holding the pages in place because we will be punching holes through it. So that's how it's gonna look ultimately. But for now, I will go ahead and you want to also just based on the tools that you have, if your hole punch can punch through multiple layers of cardstock, then go ahead and adhere everything, because and then punch the hole, because then you just have to punch it the one time. But if your hole punch tool can only go through 1 or 2 layers at a time, then you might want to determine where the holes should be punched and then punch as you go. So I'll just do that just to show you. So how I determine where to punch my hole on the cover piece is I just take one of my pages, and if you're using this die set, the page that lines up a little bit more, a little bit better than the other is the one with the straight edge as opposed to the scallop edge, because the scallop edge one is a little bit smaller. So you just want to make sure that you're using the bigger of the 2, just so that you have an idea for what the bigger page will look like once it's in. And all I do is I line it up so that it looks kind of equal. And one thing to consider is similar to how we determined where to punch initially in our swatch pages. You want to make sure that you're going to land the holes through the double layer, through the spine piece. That way you get maximum strength. But we are going to ultimately have 3 layers there, so I think we'll be okay. So then once I have it lined up where I think it should go, scooch it down just a smidge. Yep, I think that'll hit our I just don't want it too close to the edge, but at the same time, I don't want it to be so far out that it misses our spine piece. So I can feel behind the book where the spine is, so I have a little bit of an idea of where that should be lined up. And then similar to what we did before, just line it up with the holes that are already there and give it a punch, and give it a punch on this side. And sometimes if it's easier, you can just punch it a little bit just so that you have a mark, and then that way you can not have to wrestle with holding your template piece. Okay, so there we have the holes through our front cover, and now I am going to adhere the back of my front cover, and I'm just going to use my Just gonna use the PVA because oh, that's still Yupo paper. Okay, hold on. I'll use my 3-in-1. Sorry, I'm switching back and forth. I forgot that Yupo paper is not really paper as such, so probably the 3-in-1 is going to be a better choice. Beacon 3-in-1, really strong stuff, and it's my glue of choice for when I'm working with anything that's not porous. So metal embellishments or acetate for shaker cards, things like that. So I'm gonna get that in, and that's looking good. Okay. Burnish, and I'm burnishing from the back so that I don't scratch up my alcohol ink panel. I'm gonna wait until I have the back cover piece before I put my second spine piece in, and also as well, I'm gonna have to go back and punch these holes again so that it goes through the inside front cover and the second spine piece. So that's the other reason I'm waiting, so that I can just do the one punch, because I know I can punch through. My hole punch could probably punch through more layers, but then it's just more stress on my hands to do that. So okay, now for the back cover. Again, I'm gonna have the spine on the inside so that we see more of the cover piece, and get some 3-in-1 here. 3-in-1 glue, it does have a little bit of a smell, so I would work in a well-ventilated space if you're going to be using it a lot on your project. Okay, that's nice and flush. Give that a good burnish. Okay, now so see how I can bend this down completely and it folds very nicely. I can bend this down completely the other way and it folds very nicely, and the pages are nice and lined up, or the covers are nice and lined up. Now I do have this little scrap piece that is going to be my back cover. Let me do a little dry fit to see if I need to trim off the bottom, because again, I want to make sure that this can still fold nicely without, I'm going to trim a little bit without this piece interfering with the spine. So I can't find my longer scissors. I'll just use these. Just gonna take off a little, just a hair. And I know it doesn't seem like it's a lot. It's just like a little sliver, but that's all sometimes that's all you really need, and it makes all the difference. Yeah. And honestly, if you want to take off more, you can, because it's going to get covered by the inner spine piece anyways, so it doesn't really have to be super super flush and neat against there. I'm going to take off another sliver. That being said, I'm still not going to just hack off a lot. Okay. Now, if you are hiding your top hinge, your top flap in between the back covers, you'll want to attach that now too before you put the inside back cover on. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'll neaten this up a little just so that it's less distracting. Okay, so my hinge and some 3-in-1. I buy the 3-in-1 in a larger bottle, and then I just decant it into these smaller bottles with these nice metal tips because they're nice fine tip, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just in my head, but by not using it from the larger bottle, I feel like it'll preserve the glue a little bit more because it is a larger quantity and I don't use it up super fast. So I'm hoping that by not because usually when I'm working on a project, I don't always, stick the pin back on every time I use it. I sometimes just leave it open like that for the duration of my project until I'm done. And if I did that on the larger bottle, it would probably kind of dry out, thicken up a lot faster. So these smaller bottles work out just perfect for me. And I hope that means that my glue will last longer in the end. Okay, so now that I've got the top piece attached, I can put my back cover on, and that's gonna hide, it's gonna hide this hinge, it's gonna hide that hinge. So I'll get some glue on here. This is a really fun project to use up scraps, and the other idea that I had was I'm planning on making albums for my family and friends for Christmas this year, and oh cool, look at that, the glue's reacting with the alcohol ink. Neat. So I hope it doesn't do that on the other side. Oh no. So I thought that it would be really cute to make sort of matching albums. So after I make sort of the main photo album, I'll if I have scraps left over, I might make like a little miniature version, like a little pocket album. I haven't measured it out, but I don't have one of those. They're really hot right now. What are they? The Instax cameras. I grew up back in the day of Polaroids, but my understanding is the Instax are today's Polaroid camera, and I think they print out photos that are around this size. If you know, let me know in the comments what the dimensions are, but this would be really cute for if it fits. I don't even know if it does, but this would be a pretty cute little photo album for those Instax photos. Okay, so now that we have our two covers, front and back, done, I'm gonna put the second spine. And now that we've got the two layers, I mean, this is pretty substantial here. You don't really need chipboard for something as small as this. So I'm working on, let's see, this is paper. This is all paper on paper, so I'll just use my PVA glue. Although the beacon, I suppose, would be fine too. Just might be a little overkill in terms of strength. That's really generous. I'm preparing for some oozing. Okay, so what I like to do is hold it and just attach, find the gusset and just kind of place it into the gusset first. Get that nice and lined up, and then fold each of the covers into it and fold down and burnish. Oh yeah, got a lot of oozing going on here. It's okay, I'd rather be generous with my glue than have too little and then have things start falling apart. give it a good burnish, and then I'm gonna kind of score this and rebend it. The liquid glue is great because it's going to stiffen your paper as it absorbs into it, but you definitely want to make sure that it's not laying, completely flat as it stiffens, because then you'll have to kind of rescore and fold everything, and you want to make sure that you've stretched the paper so that it knows that it's intended to move in a certain way. So you just want to make sure you can kind of open and close this. And there we have it. The last thing is to put our magnets on. Oops, I do this all the time. I actually should have put the magnet on first so that this front cover could hide the magnet. Whoopsies. That's okay. I'll show you how to attach it, and we'll figure out how we hide it on the inside if we do. Okay, so I'm using these are really little. They're only 6 millimeters in diameter and 1 millimeter thick. So they are the perfect size for little albums like these, especially since we're not going through a lot of layers of cardstock either. So they don't need to be super strong and be able to hold back a lot of, like, a huge waterfall stack or a lot of flips and flaps. So what I do is kind of in the center where I want to put my magnet, I use my 3-in-1. It's great because, again, it's good for non-porous materials. So dab that on, squish it down. And what I like to do in conjunction with the 3-in-1 glue is I also like to put down a little strip of tape adhesive, double-sided adhesive tape as well. And this helps in a lot of ways. So first, it kind of blunts the edge of the magnet a little so that when you burnish and attach paper on top of it, it's not going to have like a really sharp crease that's visible. So it'll make the final finish look nicer. Second, sometimes when I'm building an album, I'll build out sort of the page base, including putting magnets on, and it's nice to put this tape over it, because if any of the 3-in-1 glue oozed out, then there isn't the potential for it to kind of accidentally stick to something else while it's still drying. And so once we've got that in, now we have to figure out placement for the matching magnet. And so I'll put it there for now. So we have a couple of options. The simplest thing to do is to attach the two magnets just like I did, so you know that it's paired. They're gonna line up perfectly. You could put a dab of 3-in-1 and just fold this over and push it down, but then that would leave the magnet visible on the front cover. But that would be the easiest thing to do. The other option is to, and this is what I typically do. So I just attach my magnet to a piece of double-sided adhesive tape, and I line up my cover such that the cover is going to line up with the top, front, edge of this top flap here. So that kind of gives me maximum space for my book. And then while holding together the front flap and the cover, I just slide this. So I don't know if you can see that. So I've got this attached to my finger, my little thumb here. And I'm going to move this in, and eventually it's going to find its magnet mate, and it's naturally going to attract. So you can hear it snap in. And so once it's there, you can release it from your finger, and oops, I slid that out too fast and it actually stuck to. Whoopsies, we'll do that again. So line up your front flap with your cover, hold it, and then got my, there we go. So once it's in, it'll find its magnet mate, so they'll line up perfectly. And once it's perfectly in there, you just press down on the adhesive and you can slide this up and off. So now it's in the exact location that it needs to be. Ideally, we would have done that before we put on this cover piece, but because we did not do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just look to see if I have another piece conveniently. I'm just gonna look for some scraps. I don't really like that. That's for my front. Well, we can hide it later. I can put like a little, oh, I know what I'll do. I'm gonna punch out just a little die cut of a heart or something, and then I'll glue that over this. Okay, that'll work. All right, so now we have to punch holes through here. So we already have some holes to use as a guide. And ideally, we do also have to punch through the back. And what you could have done was, once you had punched this first piece, you could have punched the back as well. But that's okay. If you didn't, like me, just use the same technique and the same logic that you did to determine initially where to punch your holes, and you can do that on the back. So I'm gonna go right there, and I'm just gonna punch it enough to make a depression, and that will mark it so that I can then not have to worry about holding that, and I can use two hands to punch this down, because I think this is, at this point, 3 layers. There we go. I know this is punched, and just use my pokey tool to poke that up. All right, so we've got our magnets in, our front cover in. The last piece is this top flap. There's an inner piece to that, so I'm gonna put 3-in-1 over where my magnet is. Just want to make sure the magnet doesn't move anywhere. That's gonna be securely down, and then since it's just paper on paper, I'm gonna use my PVA wet glue for the rest. I think I am going to trim down a little bit, because I don't want, again, this any of this piece to interfere with the hinge. That works good. Let's give it a fold. Yep, that's perfect. It really doesn't take a lot, but it makes all the difference in terms of functionality and being able to fold that. Okay, so I'm going to give it a burnish, but I'm going to be careful. I'm burnishing over the top of the magnet to make sure that it's nice and stuck, but when I burnish around it, I'm not giving it like a super hard burnish because I don't want that, I don't want the magnet to cause a visible bump. Because we are trying to hide it. Okay, perfect. And I'll go back off camera and cut something out to hide that one. See, it's okay if you do things a little out of order or you make some mistakes. Usually there's a way to recover and fix any mistakes. And sometimes you just end up with happy accidents that end up being better than what you originally planned. That happens to me a lot. Okay, so now all we have to do is bind everything. So I'm using just some twine in this case, but what I've done is I've doubled it up just to give it a little bit of extra strength, because these swatch books in particular are going to be functional for me, because I plan on, when I select my papers for a particular project, especially having my colored cardstock like this, I can take this to my pattern paper and just quickly flip through and find the right shade of, green that's going to be the perfect match to my pattern paper. So I anticipate being able to flip through this a lot. I also anticipate as I discover new papers, taking all of this binding out and putting in new cardstock as I discover them, so that they're nice and in the right order. Certainly you don't have to keep them in order, but the nice part about this these little books is that you can always add to them. So I have my twine doubled up, and all I did was at one end of it, I took just some of the Scotch transparent tape and rolled it around the twine. And that way I have a nice thin stiff end that I can use to thread through. So I'm going to start with my front. I'm going to go in through the front, pull this around, and just leave myself a little bit of a tail here so that I have something to tie a bow with. When I'm done, I'll open this up, and then we're just going to go through and thread the twine through each of our pages. So with that little bit of tape rolled around the end there, you can actually just line up a few pages, get the holes lined up, and then poke it right through. So one thing is that the two small frame dies that I'm using from that Tonic Studios die set, they're not exactly the same size, so the scalloped edge dies are actually a little bit smaller than the straight edged one, but so that makes lining these up a little bit not hard, just something to be aware of. Certainly you can use just the one die, but I wanted to just cut through these swatch pages efficiently, so I wanted to be able to run both dies through at the same time. So that's why I have a mix of styles, and I don't really mind it. For my swatch books of pattern paper, since those are a little bit of a keepsake, I did, I think at least for one of them, made all of the pages the same. Ooh, so this is a lot of pages. It's gonna not quite fit. Wow, I didn't realize I had so many different specialty papers. Okay, not a problem. Just be a little bit bulky. So I'll thread this through to the back. Get that in. Loop it around the back, cover, and back to the inside, and then now we're gonna go through the second hole on all of the swatch pages. See how fast this ends up being once with that tape at the end of the twine, because it's nice and stiff, and you don't have to kind of worry about the twine fraying at the edges and having to continue to snip off, have a nice clean edge. And then you can go through multiple pages at a time if you want, because it's nice and it's got that longer edge to it, so it really seems like this would take forever, but I'm almost done here, so you can see how fast this really goes. Oops. And if your tape gets a little too beat up after a while, you can always just snip it off and then put another piece on, but I haven't found that I've needed to do that. Okay, now whoa, I almost lost, that was close, I almost lost my front cover piece of twine. It wouldn't have been the end of the world, but I saved it just in time. Okay, now we're gonna get this through the front cover, and ooh, this is chunky. Okay, I'm gonna give it, enough slack so that the pages can still, holding it like this just to make sure that I have this pulled through. You don't want to pull it as tight as possible, because then you're not gonna have enough slack for the pages to actually turn. So I just want to grip it and then grip it loosely, and then just let the pages sort of fall, and make sure that there's enough slack for that movement. And then once it's in place, it helps to have that magnet closure, because now you can close that down and just tie yourself a knot. Now, since most of my other books, I'm intending on, and this one included, being able to expand it, I don't tie a super strong knot here. So I just tie, I just tie a really quick knot so that I can undo this later when it's not a matter of if, it's when I buy more paper and I need to swatch it and add it to the book. So I just give myself a loose knot, and then there you have it, our finished little swatch book. So you can open it up, see all of your pretty paper, and then when I go to make a project, now I have, so what's really fun is that I've got my pattern papers swatched, I've got my specialty paper and my neutrals swatched in their own books, then I've got my colored cardstock swatched. So when I go to start a project, if it's a card or an album or what have you. I've got all of my little swatch books here that represent, I mean, this doesn't, I haven't swatched all the papers in my collection, but when I go to work on a project, I can say, well, I know I really love this Prima Marketing Fruit Paradise paper, and I want to make a card out of, let's say, this particular pattern paper. So let me try to find, a nice pink to go with that. So I'll open up my pink, and then I can say, oh, okay, let's see which one goes. And I can hold it right up to the project and or the other paper, and sort of pick whatever pink I think best matches. And then when I found my paper, I can flip it over to the back and say, okay, yep, that's what I want to go grab. And this way I don't have to ruffle through my collection of, these large 12 by 12 sheets, or haul out all of my paper just to find the right combination. So not only is this a super cute little project, but these are going to be really functional swatch books as well. So I'll definitely be swatching the rest of my pattern papers, and I have all of my colored cardstocks and specialty papers swatched, so those are ready to go, and I'll just keep adding as my paper collection grows. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for spending time with me today, and until my next video, I hope you have a great time crafting and that you're staying safe and healthy. Have a good one. Bye.